Made with Love by Intagram.
Welcome, everybody. I'm Akhila, the co-founder of Intagram, and today we have a very special conversation. We're joined by three amazing people, and we're going to be talking about the importance of celebrating multilingual environments for today's kids. We're represented here with three of the most widely spoken languages in the world. First up, we have Anu Sehgal. She's the CEO and founder of Culture Tree. It's an organization that seeks to spread awareness about South Asia and South Asians through bilingual and cultural initiatives. Welcome to the conversation, Anu.
Thank you.
Next up, we have April. April is a Mandarin dual immersion teacher. She has an MA in bilingual education. She's raising a trilingual child, I think Mandarin, Spanish, and English. So welcome, April. We're really happy to have you here. And last but not least, we have Maritere Bellas, and she's an award-winning Latina author. She's a bilingual parenting expert. She's got fully raised bilingual children. And for 11 years, she was the parenting columnist at La Opinión, which is the largest Spanish language newspaper in the US. So welcome, Mari. We all know today that multilingualism, it's a much talked about word. The importance of being bilingual or raising bilingual children. We know from research what it does for us, right? And the fact is that most countries across the world have a form of multilingualism. The first question, I guess, maybe I'll ask you, Anu, is that everybody says that we should start early, but how early is early?
How early is basically as soon as they're born. They should be hearing, the heritage language, the native language. I think it should be the first language that is introduced. And especially that is true for the people that are expats, because they should just immerse in their own language. I would encourage parents to hire someone who knows the language. And I would say it should just happen at the get-go because they get used to it. But again, I always tell the parents who enroll in our programs, it's never too late. Don't get tempted to use a language like English language if that is the language that is being used in your country. Use your native language. Just get into this whole ritual rhythm and be very consistent with it. But I would say native language should be the first language that is introduced to a child.
Mari, my question to you is that, for someone like me who's not very comfortable in their native language, for that parent, what advice would you give to them? You're also scared of A, teaching them something wrong, B, you're scared of passing on your embarrassment of not knowing the language to your child.
The first thing that I would say, change your attitude. If you didn't grow up with the language, that doesn't mean you cannot raise a bilingual child. We belong to a community where there's a lot of English dominant parents that are raising bilingual kids. My kids were born in the United States. They are Americans first. They love Puerto Rico. They love my country. They love my culture. They love the Greek culture from my husband, but they're never going to love it the same way I do because I was immersed in it. The most important thing you do is what Anu said. You have to start at the beginning. That's a decision that the mom and dad make. Mom and dad, or dad and dad, or mom and mom. The couple makes that decision and then come up with a family language plan. And in there, have all the strategies, like what are you going to do? We use the OPOL, one parent, one language, before it was even called one parent, one language. One parent, one language, that means I talk to these kids in Spanish, my husband talks to them in English. And then along the way, there might be changes because this family language plan changes according to the child development, the interests of the child. So you have to keep it consistent but flexible. This family plan that you have in your family is not the same one that's going to work for me. So we also have to keep that in mind, that it's different for every family. My suggestion to you, don't say that you're embarrassed about your language. You can't say that in front of your kids. They're going to take all that and say, oops, if mom feels this way, then maybe I should feel that way. No, you're labeling yourself. Take that out. Your attitude, you're excited about this, and you're going to know so much more than me because you started earlier than me, and we're going to learn together. And it all has to be intentional, exciting, fun, something that you're doing, because eventually you can sit down with them and say, this is why mom and dad want you to be bilingual, the benefits of it. You're going to grow up and you're going to have so many more advantages. So the attitude is, you have to just be more positive. Today, there's different methods that you can use. And in that plan, you add those methods. There's a minority language at home. There's a time and place is a very, very popular these days, especially when you have a third language or a fourth language. So there's many others, and then your daily strategies, everything revolves there. You include that in there, the music, the play dates, playtime, the conversations, and the exposure. As often as you can input. The input is super important. This is a process. Yeah. It's not a marathon. You're not going to start and finish in a year. It continues on for a while.
April, you're raising a child who speaks English, Spanish, and Mandarin, and she's under the age of 5. One of the other things that people talk to us about is that, am I confusing the child? Am I introducing too many languages? These are all concerns that parents have.
Yeah. So actually, I think I'll start with the fact that, when kids are young, so my daughter is 2, and, research has said that, the first 5 years, it's the prime time to learn a language because their brains are wired to acquire language. So versus when they're older, they're actually, they're using other skills, right? Their cognitive skills, their work habit skills to learn a language. But when they're under 5, it just comes naturally. So it's so effortless. So I felt like I needed to take this opportunity to give her the languages that I hope that she can grow up with. So, I've had some people ask me, is 3 too many languages? What about 4? And I personally think that the number of languages don't really matter as long as there's enough exposure to the language, because with language, if you don't use it, you're going to lose it, right? So with us, we use Mandarin with our daughter, and we use MLAH, like Madi was saying. There's different methods. So minority language at home. So we speak to her in Mandarin. And when she was younger, we had a Spanish-speaking nanny for about 10 months. So that's when she started getting her Spanish. And then she started school. So that's where she's getting English. And it's very interesting to see her language production shift as, her environments have changed. So originally it was a lot of Mandarin, and then some Spanish, and I feel English was the one where we didn't really hear much of. But now we don't have the nanny anymore, so I'm trying to find more classes and more play dates for her to get more of that Spanish exposure. So I hear more Mandarin, a little bit more English, and a little less Spanish. So that just goes to show you that environment and exposure really matters. If she's surrounded in that environment, she will see there's a purpose to use the language. It's meaningful, and naturally she'll want to use it. So a really quick anecdote, actually. So this past weekend, I took my daughter to a Spanish play date. There's a local moms Facebook group gathering, and it was my very first time there. Yeah. And I was a little nervous. I was like, oh my gosh, should I go? Should I not go? I was like, no, I'm going to go because, I want my daughter to experience the language, experience the culture. If I don't, put myself out there out of my comfort zone, how do I expect her to do it? Or how is she going to get that exposure, right? So I took her there, met the families, and my Spanish is really broken, but I just tried my best. And then at the very end, so my daughter didn't really interact with the kids that much because at this age it's parallel play. So parents were talking, but she dragged me to the other end of the playground. And I didn't get a chance to talk to the parents much. But when we were leaving, I was saying bye to the families. And I said bye in English, right? I said bye. And then I hear my daughter, she just uttered the words adios, like
Adios.
on her own. Like
I love that girl.
I didn't even tell her to, speak in Spanish. And it really dawned on me that, environment matters so much. Exposure matters so much. She picked it up on the cues that, oh, we're all speaking Spanish. And, oh, I'm going to speak Spanish. Adios,
Well,
so
it's all in there
so
too,
powerful. Yes.
Yeah, it's all in
So
there. But all those 10 months, it's all here. So it
yes,
just came back right back up. That's awesome.
exactly.
I love that
Filed in
story.
there. So start young. And as long as they have enough exposure and use of the language, I think the number of languages doesn't necessarily matter.
One of the other things that crops up sometimes when parents are talking about engagement and keeping their child, like, Anu, I'm going to throw this to you because I know that you run classes and things like that. How do you keep the children continuously engaged? And if you have a child who's not quite receptive to that, especially as they get older, they have their own sense of how they would like to spend their time. How do we counter that?
So in language learning, what we have realized is that, initially it's the parents who are driving it, right? For the first few years, preschool, elementary school, the parents are driving it. And I'll answer your other question also, how do you keep them engaged? In middle school, we do see a lot of kids are trying to fit in. They're becoming teenagers. They're just going through so much other stuff that we see a real dip in the enrollments. And the kids kind of stop doing their native languages because they're also learning languages that school is requiring. And then at high school, kids come back on their own. And this is not parent-driven. So that's the trend we see quite regularly. The way we keep our kids engaged is, in the class, we have a very specific way of teaching. Then we do a lot of conversation, like we'll introduce a sentence structure, vocabulary, and then we combine the two and the kids talk to each other as if, they're talking to each other as friends. And then we bring in some fun element that is related to what they have learned, whether it is a game, whether it is a poem, whether it is a song, because it's all, everything has to finally get connected. And I think that is a critical thing, that let them have fun, let them talk to their friends. Like some kids even ask, oh, can I please do my homework with so-and-so person in the class? And, if they're fine with it, why not? So I think the key thing is, yes, you have to come up with a plan, but then also create an environment around them that supports it and just have fun with the language. Don't make it too, like the kids that I've seen that stop doing it is when the parents just get on their case. I would say if they're just not reacting to the language, let them have a break. Take a break of 6 months and then introduce it in a really, fun, relevant way. Go back to your country of origin. And when they get immersed, when they hear everyone, talking the language, they will get tempted. We just went back to India in December, and my boys, they wanted to buy T-shirts and they wanted to negotiate. So they were doing it all in Hindi. And it was just so like priceless for me that they're like negotiating. And they were so proud to do it. They were like, everything was being negotiated and they got a very good deal, by the way. So I would say just have fun with the language. And parents should also have fun with the language.
You have to find that interest. What interests them? And, maybe it's sport, maybe it's arts, maybe it's music, and just use that to your advantage of language. And my suggestion would be to use the time and place method for a while. Maybe one day a week, you continue with, that one language that they're having a hard time, even if it's a target language. Just take a break, like Anu says, and don't make it like a chore, or don't go around the house saying, oh my God, you're not going to know the language, or complain or criticize or make them feel bad, because that's making them feel bad. You don't want that. You want them to really embrace the language. And, taking a break, it doesn't hurt. and it's still in there. Look at April's daughter. I mean, after all those months, she still had all those words and all that knowledge that she acquired in her little head.
April, so you're a teacher. You have a classroom full of kids, some eager students and some not so eager ones. Do you have any tips for us?
When you were talking, I was suddenly thinking about the Korean language, because in recent years, K-pop has been huge, right? So with that booming, I think I saw on TikTok or somewhere that more and more people were learning Korean because they were interested in the music. So I think really touching upon your child's interests is key in terms of keeping them engaged and excited about the language. Another tip I would think of as from a teacher's perspective is, what type of learner is your child? Are they more linguistic? Are they more visual spatial? Is it through art, through movement? Try to figure out how they learn best and teach them that language through their best way of learning, because then, it's easier for them. They're more excited. Everything fits together. Now, if you tie in their interest and the best way they learn, that's the best of both worlds, right? And be lighthearted. Again, I agree, take a break if it's too much. One thing I'll also add is when Anu had said, they come back in high school, it also made me think about a lot of my classmates who started taking language classes in college. Maybe they stopped for a while, and then suddenly in college, somehow it's like, you miss your family because you're away, or you want to connect with your roots. People go back to the language. So I do feel like if I'm able to instill and plant a little seed, in my child's brain or heart, when they're young, and maybe they take a break because, going through puberty, whatnot, but then they'll come back around because it's still there, their interest, and that, they just need to cultivate it a little bit more. So I think when you start when they're young, even if they take a break, they will still very likely find their way back.
My classes are now in North America. You can register for the Zoom classes anywhere. I still do in-person classes in a few cities. You can find us at theculturetree.com. And I have really ramped up production of short videos with tips that I've been giving on Hindi language and Urdu language learning. So I would say definitely check them out. They're basically things that I learned from teaching kids or teaching, students, that are really helpful tips.
Perfect. Mari, would you like to tell us about where we can find you?
So I have a couple of books for parents. Raising Bilingual Children is an electronic book that was published in 2014. It has like 102 suggestions. And then Arroz con Pollo and Apple Pie, Raising Bicultural Children. They're all published in English and in Spanish. I was 18 years old when I was in Europe, and little kids around me were like 3 to 6, and they were speaking 3 and 4 languages without even like blinking. And that was so fascinating to me by that. And I remember thinking, wow, this is a gift. So, that's, I think, our purpose here is that parents want this to be, want to give this gift to their kids.
Absolutely. And April, we have these fabulous flashcards that I know that you created. So you want to tell us a little bit more about what it is that you do?
Yeah, sure. So I ran a Kickstarter campaign in the fall for these Mandarin English bilingual flashcards. Yeah, my little baby. So basically, I feel like there's a lot of, families out there wanting to raise bilingual or multilingual, kids, but they don't have the resources, or they may have the resources, but they don't know how to teach, right? So I created these cards based off of my 10 plus years of teaching in the classroom. It comes with teaching guide cards for the parents for 3 different levels: beginner, intermediate, and advanced learners. And it's made for both native and non-native Mandarin speaking families, so anyone can use it. And I'm actually thinking about making a Spanish version. So if there's interest, DM me on Instagram or TikTok to let me know. My handle is at MS April Wu. Yeah, I'm just thinking about just being able to create more educational resources for families, because, they're limited, and I just want to be able to support families who also want to do the same as me, spread the gift of bilingualism.
My first, not bilingual, it is a Hindi book. It's coming out in March. And it's basically all the things that like I want our kids to have as resources that have gone into that book.
Perfect.
I love it.
Thank you
Great.
so
Awesome.
much, all three of you, for this amazing conversation and extremely, extremely useful tips. Thank you so much for taking the time out. It's been a real pleasure.
Visit us at integralkids.com for more.